Need I tell you, the economy is failing. The economy is dying. It is headed toward a crash of probably unprecedented magnitude in our recorded history. It is falling apart literally at every corner, at every angle, at every meeting of power and influence that you can imagine. It's just a catastrophe. It's not being talked about in those terms nearly enough. There's a new book out called The Coming Financial Crisis. I would suggest it's already here, but at any rate, it is going to get a lot worse. The Coming Financial Crisis, a look behind the wizard's curtain. This is a really very exceptional book written by John Truman Wolfe, and it has a lot of interest. The guest section has John's name. You'll also see the book, and you'll go right to the Amazon page. If you want to read about it, go ahead. I'll read a little bit about it for you. Is there really a global financial ruler? One that dictates policy to the central banks of the world? Is there a central bank of central banks? That is, senior to the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, the Bank of England, and other national banks that control interest rates, inflation, deflation, prosperity, and depression? Such a bank not only exists, but John Truman Wolfe exposed this heretofore unseen hand in the global financial crisis of 2008 and their plans for the next one. No conspiracy theorist. Wolfe names names, dates, places, and actions. He doesn't mess around. If you have ever wanted to know who's behind the wizard's curtain of international finance and how to protect yourself, start at page 1 and continue reading. And to make no mistake, the events of 2007 and 2008 were a prelude. The next crisis, Wolfe predicts, will take the bail-ins used in the economic meltdowns in Cyprus and Greece and apply them worldwide, leaving catastrophe in their wake. John, welcome to the program.
Hey, Jeff, thanks so much for having me.
My honor, sir. The coming financial crisis has been in the works since 2008, and I'm wondering if you can go back even before that, since 2007 and 8 were described in this overview of your book as a prelude, if this has really been in the works for longer than that.
Well, I think it has been in the works for longer than that. It's just that the stage has been set, was set in 2007, 2008, after which I wrote the book, and that has catapulted the economy, the global economy, into a unbelievably risky and I don't know, I'm trying to think of another adjective, dangerous environment. There are today, Jeff, and this starts back before, to answer your question, before 2007, 2008, growing numbers of derivatives. Derivatives, for folks that aren't familiar with them, are simply, most of the derivatives, there are a few that don't fall into this category, but most of them are simply casino-like bets by banks and other financial institutions like hedge funds or insurance companies, but they're bets on the direction of interest rates.
It's amazing how somebody can actually wager or make a prediction, and that prediction or forecast, that bet, takes on the ability to induce investment and exude wealth. I don't understand it, but it does.
It is bizarre in the extreme. Let's say, Bank of America, this is just an example, thinks the interest rates on Greek debt are going down. Deutsche Bank thinks they're going up. They make a bet. And that bet becomes a security, an actual security, like nuts. A stock or a bond.
It's crazy.
And then, Jeff, people bet on that bet, and people bet on those bets, and others bet on those bets, and there is this ginormous pyramid that stands today, started before 2000,
Get this one, folks. You ready?
$1.2 quadrillion worth of derivatives on planet Earth.
These are not legitimate securities. They're smoke.
They're not. It's Vegas. It's a planetary-wide crap game conducted by the major banks on planet Earth.
It's a psychosis. Hey, here's another question that might merit your time. Do any people who invest in these things make a short-term turnaround? Is there a quick hit that keeps them looking for action?
Yeah, the banks, the answer to the question is yes. And as a rule, you don't have individuals, doing these bets. You've got institutions doing them. And as rates go in one direction or another, a derivative will become more valuable or less valuable, and then they can be sold. So the answer to your question is yes, there are short-term hits. There's no product here, Jeff. There's nothing other than gambling, and
it's just vapor. That's all.
It is vapor, and that's the concern today, because these derivatives have been growing and growing and growing, and the major banks on the planet are pregnant with these things. U.S. banks, Jeff, hold $227 trillion worth of derivatives.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, Citibank, J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, B of A. These big banks are just full of this stuff. And what is interesting, and I use that word, advisedly, is this. The bankruptcy laws were changed such that secured creditors in a bankruptcy take precedent over unsecured creditors. And in a bank, the derivatives are secured creditors, and depositors are unsecured creditors. People don't know that when they put money in a bank, they just deposit money in a bank, that money now belongs to the bank. Legally and technically, it belongs to the bank. And they are liabilities like they laid the carpet, in the lobby. The bank owes it to them.
Yeah.
But they're simply unsecured creditors. So if a bank starts to become troubled, then a new policy called bail-ins enables the derivatives holders to take the first assets and the unsecured creditors, meaning the depositors, to pick up whatever crumbs are left.
Is this something that, since it is such a function of psychology, that people could lose confidence, like a no confidence vote, they lose confidence in the whole derivatives field? Could they walk away in numbers strong enough to cause the financial collapse you're talking about? Is that where this could come from?
Well, I don't think so. I think I think there will be a collapse. So I certainly think that's coming. I think that is coming without question. To me, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. What precipitates it? I don't know. You'll probably have some kind of Lehman Brothers-like event.
There'll be a trigger event or an observable event of some kind that people will point to as being the cause, but that won't necessarily be true.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. There'll be something, and all of a sudden the press will dive on it, and these banks will seek to all of a sudden bail out of these things, and there will not be enough buyers, and we'll have a collapse, just like we did at Lehman. But I think this collapse will be much, much, much bigger. My prediction is there will be bank holidays, just like there were during the Depression, meaning that the banks will be closed for some period of time. I'm not saying that it's going to shut down the entire banking system forever, but I think there will be bank holidays where folks won't be able to use their ATM cards or their credit cards. And so there are solutions in the book. I mean, I've got a whole chapter on solutions, so I don't want this to be all...
Let me ask you a question tangential to what you just said. No credit cards, no debit cards, and there is clearly a major war now on the loose to take cash out of society. Not just ours, but Europe as well. The 400 euro note is gone or going. They want, over here, there's talk that they want the $100 bill to go away. The 50 probably not far behind. They're trying to take cash away from the people. How will that war against cash factor into the collapse you're talking about?
That's a really interesting and, if I can be so kind, intelligent question. It's really perceptive. There is a war on cash, and the 500. I don't think it's a 400 euro. I think it's a 500.
It's 500. Euro correct. I stand corrected.
In Europe, and Larry Summers, a former Secretary of Treasury, and
he's the cheerleader.
Cheerleader has called for an elimination of the $100 bill. There's a war on cash, and the reason that there's a war on cash, and I'll get to the answer to the question, but if you have cash, you can hold it out of the bank. You can do transactions that the government can't see. Mm-hmm. If there is no cash, and it is coming to that, money will be zeros and ones in the not too distant future. I am sure of it. That way, government can monitor every single transaction that you make.
Of course,
you can be penalized along with this war on cash is negative interest rates, where you have to pay the bank or to hold your deposits, or you have to pay a government to buy a bond. That is also going on in Europe. $7 trillion worth of negative interest rate bonds. So if there are just zeros and ones, mm-hmm. Jeff, then when there's a crash, they can be manipulated very, very quickly. There can't be a run on zeros and ones if they shut off your ATM and your credit card. You can't go to the bank and get a stack of hundreds or 50s or 20s or whatever.
Cash is our last chance, John, to actually manifest wealth outside, and in quotes, the current banking financial system we have. It's our last bit of freedom to manifest and hold wealth outside the banking system. And they don't want that. They want that to go away. And it will go away in time because they will make it go away.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I would add to that cash and, precious metals, gold and silver, which for thousands of years has been treated as money. So, and it won't surprise me at some point down the line, and I'm not talking about tomorrow, that they'll come after precious metals as well. But the first target is exactly what you said. It's cash. Your money is going to be credits in a bank, and that's it.
That'll bring back what already is a viable means of working around that, and that's barter system. I don't know that they're going to try and control that. It would be rather fruitless at this point, maybe later. But bartering is going to become, I think, as soon as cash disappears, and it's on the way, bartering is going to become big. I don't know how big, but I think it's going to become big.
Well, it's always been the case. Black markets are built up around systems where there are, controls on your money and so forth and so on. So yes, bartering will come, and it's why folks should have the kinds of things that they can barter. And this whole scheme, Jeff, is being run out of. And during the introduction, you talk about is there a central bank of central banks, and there is. It's in Basel, Switzerland. Most people have never heard of the Bank for International Settlements.
That's BIS. Yeah.
BIS, which is the central banker's central bank. So the U.S. Fed, the Bank of Italy, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of Germany, they all belong to this bank. And it is that bank that dictates to the central banks of the world and thus controls the economies of planet Earth. The BIS is above the law, Jeff. Its employees are immune from prosecution. Swiss law does not affect it. It has its own military on the premises. It is like an entity into itself. And this is the global financial dictator of planet Earth.
Well, it's like the City of London, but even more intense. Fascinating.
Exactly correct. I started writing this book when I read an article in the Wall Street Journal during the financial crisis of 2008, and it was written by a little guy named Timothy Geithner, who later became the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, but at the time he was the president of the New York Fed. And he wrote this article in the Wall Street Journal calling for a GMA. Now, I've been a banker both in San Francisco and Beverly Hills for some years. I'd never heard of a GMA, didn't know what he was talking about. I researched a little further. GMA stands for a Global Monetary Authority. So this is basically a financial dictator for the planet, and I predicted that there would be one coming, and sure enough, on April 2nd, 2009, when the G20, the 20 industrial nations finance ministers, met in London, April 2nd, 2009, they established an entity called the Financial Stability Board, and that entity was put inside of the Bank for International Settlements, and it is that entity, the Financial Stability Board inside the BIS, that is dictating to the central banks.
All right. Oil has picked itself up in the last 10 days, up about 30%. What does this mean in terms of the coming crash? Oil is just a fringe player. Is oil a primary player? What role does oil play in all of this?
Well, I think oil is a very, it's a critical player, and it has been for decades. And this crash from, I can't remember how high it got, 100 and something, down to, I don't know where the bottom was, 26 something, and it's bounced up to what, 31, 32. I don't follow oil every day, but what, $31, $32 a barrel. There's a little blip. Whether or not it's going to hold, whether oil will hold or not, I don't know. But there are massive economies that are very dependent on this, and hundreds of billions of dollars in loans, oil-based loans. As oil producers cannot repay those loans, Jeff, to the banks then become subject to crash, subject to runs, subject to being closed down. I mean, Russia runs on oil almost entirely. That entire country is based on oil. That's certainly true of Middle Eastern countries as well, but a lot of people don't know that Russia is completely oil dependent. So
they're the second largest supplier in the world, I believe, aren't they?
Yes,
number 2.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. They have been number 1 and they have been number 2. They've been bounced back and forth. They're number 2 now, at least the last report I read. I gave a speech over there a little while ago at a new university called Skolkovo, and which is, in their new, what they're trying to emulate is the Silicon Valley. It's a beautiful university, and I was in good company. Schwarzenegger had talked there. Condoleezza Rice had spoken there. What
is Arnold doing now, by the way? Is he back to making movies?
I see him advertising, PlayStation games, and he's did another Terminator movie. I don't know. I mean, the entertainment career has faltered. It seems to me. Just as somebody who's a big fan of movies.
He should have stayed in the movie business. Stayed away from governor. That was stupid.
Yep. That didn't work out well.
Okay,
anyway.
Let's take a look around here. Gold now 1244, right around there. Doing better. And we talked about oil. Let's check in. Crude now is 33.83.
Okay, that's a pretty strong move over the last few weeks. Gold has had a similar move. 1247 today. I think almost 1250. Gold has had a very strong rally, and the kind of question is the bear market in precious metals over? And at this point, I'm inclined to say yes. There's been a bear market in gold and silver for the last whatever it's been, 18 months or something. But silver has bounced today up to about $15. Gold at close to 1250.
Yeah.
These are off of major lows, so there's a strong rebound in oil, gold, and silver.
John, why do we care, knowing what we do, knowing that precious metals, especially gold, are being controlled and manipulated? Why do we really care?
Well, I think we care because of survival. I think we care because if there is going to be a financial catastrophe or chaos in this country, if the banking system is going to go under, and I don't like to be sounding like some gloom and doomer, but I do think this is coming, then you want to be able to survive, and you want to be able to have some medium of exchange, which is what gold and silver provides. You want to be able to provide for your family and eat and put gas in your car, or whatever other expenses you have that help you and your family survive. So I think that's a reason to care.